Hey, welcome to part 2 of Harvesting a Dream. The last time that we talked about how that if you're going to pursue the dream that God has for you, then you don't want to settle for yesterday's good. Don't get so caught up on what God has done that you miss out on the fact that He's the God of the future and He wants to do new stuff through you. And we don't want to be noisy Christ followers. We want to be active, sincere Christ followers who don't just look like we're doing the right thing. We actually want to do the stuff that God is calling us to. And then we also talked about how that if your dream isn't intimidating to you, then chances are it's offensive to God. We don't want to dream dreams that are small. We want to dream dreams that are huge, that are so huge that there's no way that we'll ever accomplish them unless God steps in on our behalf in order to help us. I want to kind of continue with the idea of what it looks like now if we're going to go after the dreams that God has for us, to be able to see what God is going to do Himself in order to bring the dream to pass. Some very important things that if we don't allow God to do those things, then it's going to be really difficult for us to see the dream take place. In 1 Chronicles 13, we read about how that David had seen that the Ark of God had been captured and kind of had been put away for such a long time, and he was excited about getting it back to Jerusalem where it belonged. And so he goes and he gets the Ark and he starts bringing it back. And he doesn't realize that God has a process that He wants to go through in order for that to happen. And so David is very quick to make big, fast decisions that are not good, and he ends up really making God angry and all of that, and some big consequences take place because of it. And so David has to go back to the drawing board. The ark gets put away once again in a place that is not the center of Israel's attention, and it's just really disappointing. And so the first thing that we want to think about when we talk about that story, when we talk about the dreams that God has for us, is that God wants to grow you before He ever wants to grow the dream. David had some learning to do about the processes of God. When I was in high school, we had to dissect a pig. And it was really important that we were cautious and careful when it came to dissecting the pig's brain. Now, I know that's gross, but I'm going someplace. We were told by our teacher that we had to take our time. Well, I'm not a patient guy. And so when I started dissecting the pig's brain, I got in a hurry, and I did exactly what the teacher said not to do. And rather than opening up to see a beautiful, nice pig brain, mine turned to mush. And my teacher was Irish, and he looked at me and he goes, "What are you doing? You turned the brain to custard." And I didn't pass that little test, and so I had to start all over again. In our lives, when we get in a hurry, bad things can happen, and the dream that God gives us can end up turning to mush. The second thing that we look at when we look at the story is that God not only wants to grow you, He wants to grow the team that He is putting around you. When David made the mistake of just going and grabbing the ark and thinking he could just bring it back to Jerusalem, he ended up having to teach his team a few things too, and it took some time. And so he had to gather them around him and do some research and start planning and prepping and praying about what they were supposed to do in order to bring the ark back to Jerusalem. And it took time and it took patience because God wanted to really give them an opportunity to learn what it means to trust Him and to do what He's called them to do, not just to go out half-cocked and think that they're going to accomplish big things for Him. God wants to develop your team as much as He wants to develop you. And then finally, if we allow God to grow me, if I allow God to grow the team, then God is going to begin to build the dream. And the exciting thing that takes place is that as David spends time with God on his own, as he spends time with his team and begins developing the plan that God has given him, then there comes a day when it's time to go and get the ark and to bring it to Jerusalem. And they're very careful and cautious in how they do this. And you can read about it in 1 Chronicles chapter 15. And it's so exciting because God honors their planning, God honors their dreaming, and they come into the city with joyful shouts and dancing and jumping, and it's the wildest that we ever see King David. It's so wild in his worship and his joy that God has began to really fulfill the dream that He put in his heart. And so as we go about dreaming for God, we have some exciting things to look forward to. But we have to let Him grow me, have to let Him grow the team, and then God will grow the dream. Thanks for stopping by today, and stay tuned for part 3 of Harvesting the Dream.
Please hang up and try again.